Hi everyone, welcome. I had an opportunity to photograph aircraft at an air show at the local Air Force base where I live. This air show provided me with the chance to test my Z9's version 5.0 airplane detection. I have used my Nikon Z6 II to photograph airplanes in the past and other DSLR cameras. In this video, I want to give all those airplane photographers going to an air show or casually photographing aircraft a guide on using mirrorless cameras and DSLR cameras for aircraft photography. Welcome to my guide on airplane photography. My name is Vaughn. I do aircraft photography anytime there is an air show locally. At the air show, I get to take some challenging shots of some old and newer aircraft. Whether you're a beginner or a seasoned photographer, capturing airplanes in flight can be an exhilarating experience. Today, I'll walk you through the essential steps to get stunning airplane shots. Step number 1, choose the right equipment. The first step in getting good aircraft photography is to make sure you have the right gear. A DSLR with enough FPS to capture fast-moving objects is a must. This Nikon D3100 has only 3 frames per second. It can capture planes sitting on the airfield, but when the faster planes are in the air, you will be limited by the frames per second. Basically, having higher FPS gives you the opportunity to have a higher keeper rate. The Nikon Z9, on the other hand, has 20 frames per second, 40 frames per second, and 60 and 120 frames per second. But for most photographers, this camera is pricey and overkill. Next, you will need a telephoto lens, 200 millimeters or longer. This is ideal for capturing distant subjects like airplanes. When I first started, I used a 70 to 200 millimeter in crop mode or DX mode on a full frame camera to change the field of view. If you do the math on a crop sensor, you get 1.6 the field of view that a full frame would get. The equivalent field of view is the same as a 100 to 300 full frame lens if you put in DX mode. Now I upgraded to a Sigma 150 to 600 millimeter f5 to 6.3 DG f-mount lens. This lens gives me a better field of view for aircraft that can fly higher. When you're photographing jets with a lens like this, you can see jets maneuver in the clouds. If you're not at the air show but photographing from surrounding areas, this lens is a must. Most of the maneuvers happen in the front of the crowd at the air show. Now with this telephoto lens, you can even the plane of field and take some photos from a different field of view. Consider using a tripod or a monopod to stabilize your shots, especially if you're using a heavy telephoto lens like this one. Even with lens and body stabilization on, if you're holding a 4-pound lens, camera shake can capture blurry and out of focus photos. If you're using a tripod, turn off the stabilization if you're using an older DSLR or lower end mirrorless camera. Newer cameras like the Nikon Z9, the IBIS can detect the tripod and turn off image stabilization. Check the manufacturer of your camera to see if this applies to you. Next, choose a location with a clear view of the sky and where airplanes frequently pass overhead. Airports, aviation museums, or aircraft viewing areas are a great option if you don't have an air show in your area. Personally, I get to the air show an hour ahead of the show to set up. Plus, I can stake a claim up front with my seat and equipment. Or if you don't want to arrive early, pay for the VIP section. This viewing area is usually covered and you won't get sunburn. I always get sunburn at air shows because I'm too cheap to pay for the VIP section. Plus, air shows last 3 to 4 hours and they usually start during the midday. Even in the springtime in Texas, that's hot. Now for those that don't want to pay for parking at the event or admission, you can capture some great shots from a distance, but your keeper rate might suffer. During an air show, the planes make several passes in front of the crowd. With the right location, you can adjust your camera settings on the fly because you know the flight path of the planes or where they'll pass next. If you're photographing aircraft in other situations, Check your local regulations or restrictions regarding photography in these areas because they might be classified or out of bounds. Step number 3, plan your shoot. Research flight schedules to determine when the best time to photograph airplanes. Early morning and late afternoon light can provide beautiful golden hour lighting. Consider the direction of the sun to avoid harsh shadows or glare on your subjects. Try to photograph in a place free of obstructions such as building, traffic, or other distracting scenery. When photographing airplanes, I'm usually using a f-stop between 8 and 13 depending on the ambient light. This higher aperture will give you better detail of the planes and blur out the distractions. Step number 4, camera settings. Set your camera to shutter priority if you're a beginner. Having the camera in shutter priority will give you one less choice to make. All you have to do is set for shutter. When a plane is flying past you at 500 miles per hour, you only have seconds to make a decision. For advanced photographers, manual mode is the way to go. It gives you full control over the settings. Shutter priority, aperture priority, and even auto seem like all good choices, but they don't keep up if you're photographing a prop plane, then a helicopter, then a jet. Manual modes means setting the shutter speed, the f-stop, to create more eye-catching photography. Take for example these two planes flying wing to wing. The camera will meter these two with the same aperture and won't increase the aperture due to the space between the two planes. So that's the reason why you want to be in manual, so you have control. Also, while you're changing your settings, you want to use a faster shutter speed to capture airplanes. Now you'll need different settings for different airplanes. Prop planes need a shutter speed between 1/125th to 1/60th. Helicopters need a shutter speed between 1/100 to 1/25. Remember, your shutter speed will control how moving objects will look. Slow shutter speeds blur motion. For ideal photos of prop planes, you will want the props to be blurred. Adjust the shutter speed until you get that mesmerizing prop blur. Jets I usually shoot at 1/1000 to 1/2000. I use a shutter speed of 1/100 if I want to blur the background and 1/2000 if I want a sharper photo. This is a bonus tip. Panning is very important while trying to capture fast-moving jets. Panning means you are following the subjects. This creates amazing results. I practice this with aircraft on TV, and you can arrive early and practice on planes landing, taking off. Panning allows you to use slower shutter speeds. And if you want to capture some great photos, that is great. Next, choose a narrow aperture or a higher f-stop to create greater depth of field, ensuring sharpness across the entire image. When taking aircraft photographs, you want the planes to be sharp to show the details of the planes, of the engines, of the wings, the fuselage, and the markings. A good starting point is f8, and you can go up depending on the ambient light outside. Another important setting is the ISO. Adjust the ISO to maintain proper exposure without introducing too much noise. Using auto ISO works great on a sunny day. If it is an overcast day, you will want to set your ISO max below an ISO of 3200. It depends on what you're comfortable with. My Nikon Z9 can handle an ISO of 3200, but I might have to use a noise reduction software to clean up some of that noise. Step number 5, composition. Frame your shot with the plane as the main subject, but also consider the surrounding environment to add content and interest. Experiment with different angles, perspectives, and composition to create visually compelling images. Leave some space in front of the plane to convey a sense of movement. Look at the collection of these Z17 Globemaster 3 photos. Notice how each one shows motion. Step number 6, focus and tracking. Use continuous autofocus to keep the airplane sharp as it moves across the frame. Now you want to check your manual to see which one is best for airplanes for your particular camera. Utilize focus tracking features if available, or manually adjust focus to keep their airplanes in sharp focus. Whether you're using a base DSLR camera with limited focus points or a Z9 with 3D tracking, You want to learn what autofocus mode works the best for your camera, because Canon and Sony's and other cameras use different auto tracking methods. Step number 7, be patient and practice. Airplane photography requires patience and practice. Don't get discouraged if you don't get the perfect shot right away, because that happened on my first 2 times out. I didn't get the perfect shot, but I got a few keepers. Take multiple shots with varying settings and compositions to increase your chances of capturing standout images. For comparison, when I first started, I machine gunned about 20 to 30 shots with a DSLR. I think it was my D800. As I did more air shows, I took less shots and learned how to use the right settings and techniques. And finally, with the right equipment, preparation, and technique, airplane photography can be rewarding and an enjoyable pursuit. Remember to respect any rules or regulations when photographing your nearest airport or aviation facility. And last tip, get there early so you can capture the best photos and get the best spot. Thank you for watching, and watch my other videos on photography.